Hey y'all, AlecAza tuning in, this time wanting to talk about a beloved horror classic I recently played for the first time. I considered streaming my first playthrough of Silent Hill 2, but after completing the game, I'm quite content in not doing so. For comparison, I knew Silent Hill on the PS1 was going to be a great time. It's the game that kickstarted a highly acclaimed horror series after all. It would be the perfect game to stream during the spooky season, which is something I already had done so in the past. I haven't finished it in full though, thus I went back and completed my first playthrough of Silent Hill, achieving the best possible ending for that game. It took me 2 years, but I finally crossed off the original Silent Hill on my backlog, confirming my initial assessment that would be quite the frightful time. Silent Hill 2 though, is different. Way different. I've heard so much about this game beforehand, and there's not anything I can say that hasn't been said already. Even with my limited knowledge before playing the game, I understood that the sequel is in a different league of its own. While Silent Hill 1 is a fun, fearful time, a great game to play on stream, Silent Hill 2, to me, is a deeply personal, orchestrated wallow of despair that I have never encountered before in a video game. It got to me. I doubt streaming Silent Hill 2 would have been that entertaining. It would be 6 hours of me staring into the screen despairingly, quiet, mouth agape, tears swelling in my eyes, and constantly shifting my view to my second monitor, which had a guide open. While I didn't have to rely on it often, it did help me whenever my focus wavered, though I would find that would rarely happen. Each aspect of this game was meticulously crafted in a way that supported the overall themes and messages of Silent Hill 2. This is what I want. This is video games to me. This is art. From the grotesque oddities that plague James' mind to the helpless, albeit reflective soundtrack, to the game's unique way of gauging the player's playstyle, evaluating their own mentality. It's perfect. Taking full advantage of the interactive medium, Silent Hill 2 tells a story about troubled individuals traversing through the fog of a haunted town to rediscover parts of themselves in order to heal from the pain brought upon them. Let me talk about it a bit. Mostly spoil-free video by the way, but I highly urge you stop here if you haven't played the game. I highly recommend you jump into it as blind as you can, well, as blind as you can 20 years after the release of the game. This won't be a particularly long video, I just wanted to get out the way before the release of Silent Hill 2 Remake. And from what I've gathered from the teasers and trailers, the Silent Hill 2 remake will seem a bit different from the original. Therefore, before Konami has a chance to release a potentially inferior version of Silent Hill 2, I figured I should make my own video detailing my thoughts and feelings of the survival horror classic. Let's tackle the biggest issue that many others have with Silent Hill 2, combat. An aspect of Silent Hill 2 largely disregarded by the community. Actually aged well in my opinion. It could just be my own experience, but I found no issue with the tank controls at all, even in Silent Hill 1. I keep hearing the fear-mongering of tank controls and how it prohibits many from properly enjoying older survival horror games, but I cannot see how it is possible for them to ruin the overall experience here. As others have claimed before, the gameplay in jank enhances the fear factor of encounters with enemies, as the player struggles to dispatch them without facing a few hitches first. I feel the tank controls belong here more naturally than any other survival horror, solely due to James not being well versed in combat. He's an ordinary human being, not a soldier forged in combat. The game itself does take into account how you treat James throughout the journey, ultimately affecting which ending the player will receive. And where do I even begin with the soundtrack? Akira Yamaoka is a genius in creating such scary ambience that years later there's not another horror game that quite matches it. Now that I think about it, music in horror games is not often the focus. Of course, each horror game has their own ambience that they take into consideration, but the Silent Hill soundtracks are something truly special. This is the first time I encountered experimental rock incorporated into a horror game soundtrack. Each ending theme is accompanied with a banging tune that, while some may claim is tonally inappropriate, I suggest otherwise. Angel's Thanatos, an alternative rock track that blasts after the somber and depressing In Water ending, fits nicely in my opinion due to my own interpretations. And of course, interpretation is key in Silent Hill 2. The reverse wheel harmonizes a catchy tone, while Overdose Delusion is a track underrated by many. Promise is not only my favorite ending theme out of all of them, it's my favorite track in the soundtrack. For good reason, with its amazing, inspiring instrumentals. Each ending theme correlates wonderfully with the ending attached to them. Several of the endings offer interesting perspectives of how one could overcome or succumb to guilt. Personally, I'm still quite satisfied with the ending I received during my first playthrough, which is the most hopeful of them all. The plot and themes of Silent Hill 2 is my, alongside many others, favorite and most profound aspect of the game. The more the story lingers in my mind, the more I am enamored by it. I don't necessarily dislike James, but I don't necessarily like him either, though he's one of, if not the most compelling horror protagonists I've met recently, and one that I deeply resonated with. James has done a lot of bad things, clearly. Throughout the game, there are subtle messages hinting to the player that James is here suffering for a reason, being tormented by fiendish monsters alongside the iconic, frightening figure known as Pyramid Head. That the letter received by his wife at the beginning of the game is not all what it seems to be. During his revisit to Silent Hill, James stumbles upon other lost souls like him, such as Angela and Eddie, still recovering from their own past traumas. Maria, a seductive lady who resembles Mary, so much so that James claims that she could be his wife's twin. As the player progresses throughout the game, revelations are made about the supporting cast. The reasons for being in this town are revealed, highlighting how each one of them processes the trauma brought upon them. I'm very happy I played Silent Hill 2. This past week I turned 21, and it was my worst birthday yet. I've heard that once you grow older, your birthdays matter less and less, which is sadly becoming true. Years ago, I would invite friends over, having a birthday bash. Rows of pizza greasing the tables and the sounds of video game blowing out my old TV speakers. This recent birthday of mine saw none of that. Not even a call from my parents or most of my friends wish me well. I don't want to sound selfish. I'm sure other people receive even less on their birthdays. But it further dampened my already horrible mood these past months. This past summer alone, I lost an important relationship, lost a job with the potential to become a larger career, and accumulated a scary amount of debt due to my impulses. The mistakes I've made piled up and it all came crashing down, drowning me. To say it's been difficult is an understatement. Wrapped in self-destructive behaviors, I was unable to find the motivation to write, nor play the video games I've always been passionate about. I couldn't meet the deadlines I've made for myself, further sinking me down into a pit where I lay motionless each day, longing for demise. Yet, there was something about Silent Hill 2 that made me complete it in one sitting. I often find troubles in staying focused when playing a video game nowadays. Silent Hill 2 refused to accept that. It wanted all of my attention. It sank its claws into my flesh, demanding that I stay seated and focused. And for 6 straight hours, I did. A rare sight in my current life, but something I'm so happy to experience again. The only other games in my life capable of this feat are Persona 3 and Metal Gear Solid 2, only this time it feels much more personal. Just like those titles, Silent Hill 2 is a perfect work of art that deserves all the praise and recognition it receives. An iconic, dreadful survival horror game that leaves the player in constant anxiety and self-doubt. But through it all, I found a soothing, downright therapeutic experience that helped me sort out my own beliefs that a better version of myself is possible. It reminded me what it means to be human, with how trauma affects our very lives, how each one of us recovers differently in our own ways. We will stumble in our recovery as it is a daunting, challenging process, and I hope each one of us are able to move on with our lives, just as Mary wished James would in her farewell letter. A story so profoundly human that it's no wonder it left me sobbing towards the end when the game showed me the full extent of Mary's letter. There's nothing else quite like it. In my restless dreams, I see that game, Silent Hill 2. I promised I would work on ongoing projects, but I never did. Well, I'm here now, getting these thoughts out of my system. Apologies for the shortness of this video. After all, I don't consider it an official review of mine. There is a lot to talk about Silent Hill 2 since every aspect of it demands attention and speculation, but this video isn't here to serve that. It's merely my newborn thoughts on the game as a whole and how I deeply resonate with it. Fully edited reviews will be coming out soon, such as Astro Bot and Persona 3 Reload, games where I have more to discuss about. But hey, I might have to make another review on the upcoming Silent Hill 2 remake, which, depending on how well Bloober Team executes the deliberate, subtle, and dreadful masterpiece, which are aspects they have trouble in their own projects, may warrant a piece from yours truly. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. In the meantime, stay alive, have yourselves a good one. I'll see you all in my future streams and reviews. I promise.